Hello, and welcome to The Confident Commit, the podcast for anyone who wants to join the conversation on how to deliver software better and faster.
If you're looking to build a testing ship, tune in, let's confidently commit.
You're listening to Season 2, Episode 18. I'm your host, Rob Zuber, CTO of CircleCI, the industry leader for all things CI and CD. Today, I'm joined by Shailesh Kumar, SVP of Engineering at ClickUp. Shailesh, thanks so much for joining me. It's great to have you.
Great to have you be here.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. Hopefully, you've had a chance to catch up on this, and for anyone that's been listening at all, we've spent a lot of time in this Season 2 talking about failure, learning from failure, experimentation, building hypotheses, and super excited to get your perspective on that. In particular, I think the viewpoint that I'm really interested in is, having come into many different organizations as they're heading into, really big growth phases. And so can you give us just a couple minute, recap of where you are now, but some of the other places that you've jumped in and sort of what that's looked like from a scaling perspective?
So I think my first scale journey started at Tableau and joined Tableau very early on pre-IPO, scaled the enterprise side of the team. So built the enterprise product, the server product, launched it, took it to IPO, and then built the data management product suite at Tableau. And then those are the two journeys where at Tableau, a lot of growth. Tableau had a great run before it got acquired by Salesforce. And then after Tableau, I went to MuleSoft, was brought in to stabilize the platform and scale the organization, both from a process perspective and people perspective. Stabilize the platform and also take MuleSoft is very focused on enterprise, so take it down to mid-market and SMB to protect itself from some of the upcoming vendors that were coming in that space. So that was the second phase of my organizational growth, both from a process and a people perspective. And then from then on, joined ClickUp joined ClickUp last year when we were 45 engineers, and now we are 150 plus, growing the organization both from a people perspective, but also from maturing the process, maturing the platform, the infrastructure, our CI/CD pipeline, our how we build software, how we deliver software. So a lot of maturity and organizational growth in the last 1 year at ClickUp.
Awesome. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Getting CI/CD in place and doing it well, really important to scaling. But let's leave that one there. You mentioned something in there that I really want to key on, although there's a couple of interesting points as well around the different types of places you've done the scaling. So 40 to 150, I think, is a really interesting transition. You're going from basically everybody knows each other, probably knows what everybody does, up to that threshold of Dunbar's number of just, I don't even know who some of these people in the organization are. And so there's not just the scaling, like you're obviously building more product and building it faster, but just the organizational strain that's caused by that. So you probably get, I'm just going to guess, but you probably have, failures in terms of we thought this was going to work for customers or whatever, but also sort of organizational changes or approaches that you've taken that, maybe they worked before, didn't work here, maybe, just didn't line up the way that you thought. How is that, I guess, does that line up? This whole 40 to 150 feels like a very important transition phase from kind of like, we can just work with each other to we need process. And how has that transition gone? Like, is there something particularly that has gone really well in sort of getting that team to scale effectively, and any sort of learnings that you've taken away in the last year?
So you're right about, I think the 40 to 150 is probably the first phase. And then you go from, hundreds to 100,000, but you have to think of business lines and product lines. When you go from 40 to 150 or 200, in the 40% organization, everyone knows each other. You don't need process. Everyone knows what they're working on. You don't need code ownership. You don't need your over CI/CD pipeline. Everyone knows everything, and it goes from there. And then you go to 150 to 200, where you need vision, you need mission for teams. You need teams. You need organizational structure. The teams needs their mission. They need their vision. You need to start hiring managers. You need to keep align them. Have code ownership, have the good infrastructure that can scale both from a code delivery perspective as well as from an infrastructure perspective. Because keep in mind that you have 40 people writing code, and you suddenly go to 150 people writing code. there is an aspect of how much code is going into your system, and you need to make sure your system is robust enough to protect against all those changes going in. So one thing I've realized is that all my years of scaling is no two places are same, and many of us who have who have a lot of experience and a lot of gray hair, sometimes we get we get a little bit of full of ourselves and try to repeat some of the things that have worked for us in the past, and that's where almost always I've failed there. Almost always I've tried something to just rinse and repeat at some place, and I've always failed. And that's the learning that I've always had, that you have to, whenever you go to a new place, you have to step back and think of the business you are in. Think of the people around you. The people are not the same. The business is not the same. The macroeconomic conditions are not the same. I mean, if you think of even the services available for you, the clouds, like 15 years back, we were all developing on-prem software. Now we're delivering cloud software. Even 7 years back, even if people were delivering cloud software, they did not have the services available to them on AWS, GCP, or Azure. Now you have tons of them. So the technology landscape has changed. And every time you have to step back and learn from your experience and not repeat your experiences. That's the biggest learning I've had, that when we started scaling ClickUp, I did try to implement some of the same things I implemented at Tableau and probably a few things at MuleSoft. And I very quickly realized that ClickUp is a very unique journey. It's growing very, very fast. There are things that I can now leverage from the cloud. There are things that I can leverage from a broader organization. Because of COVID, everyone is working remote, whereas earlier people were in offices. Now it really doesn't matter where you hire. So it opened up different possibilities for me that rinse and repeat was not the right thing to do. And that's where I quickly realized I started failing, and I realized that, you know what, that's a bad idea.
Well, I love that. I love that lesson, because I feel like, well, oddly, often in our early careers, I'm sort of projecting past myself. You could tell I'm talking very thinly just about myself, but we have this sense that we know everything, right? And then we think, oh wait, no, I don't. But I'll fail this time and this time and this time, and then will have sorted it out, and then I'll be able to just apply my learnings everywhere I go. And you can absolutely apply things from those lessons, but it's not the solution that you end up applying, right? It's like, oh, I know how to step back and think about this problem, but now I have to take in this totally different context, to your point. Like, and to the point of gray, I try to keep my hair trimmed so you can't see how much of it is gray, but like, to that point, that it never stops, right? You're sort of experimenting with bigger problems and sort of more complex issues, maybe. But if you ever come to this notion that you have the answers versus how to find answers, you're going to be in big, big trouble, right? You just can't, you can't apply what works somewhere else. And so always being open to, experimenting, creating hypotheses like this is a lifelong journey. This is not something you get the answers, then you just go apply them. So you talked a little bit about the different contexts, and I was mentioning this early based on what you described. Like, you were at Tableau pre-IPO and then post and into the acquisition. And then I might have the timing wrong, but MuleSoft would have been a Salesforce company also at the point that you went into. Is that correct?
I left Tableau before it got acquired by Salesforce. And I joined MuleSoft actually the month it got acquired by Salesforce. So very similar, very same time. But I joined both those companies before, or at least started joining them before they got acquired by Salesforce. But yeah, I can say that, hey, for the last 10 years, I was at Salesforce.
Right, there's Salesforce companies everywhere. But I would imagine the sort of scaling something inside of a big organization like Salesforce, even if it's still a standalone product, is different from the kind of pre-IPO hypergrowth phase. What really felt different about that experience, or did it, like, has Salesforce happen to create an environment where these organizations really feel independent, or was there's something that you had to sort of tackle differently in order to have success, growing inside of what's a fairly large, stable organization overall?
I think it was different. It was very different. So if you think of Tableau's journey when Tableau was scaling, it was a lot around product experience, and it was a lot around the problem statement that we were trying to solve. So we were trying to, let's say, how do you create permissions and share your dashboards? How do you create dashboards? How do you create more analytical functions? So it was a lot around those things at Tableau, and that's where we were scaling. So we were scaling more in the terms of the features and the capabilities. I think when became part of Salesforce provided a lot of rocket fuel to MuleSoft in terms of exposing it to large enterprises. And at that point, the biggest thing that mattered was trust and reliability. The biggest thing, and that's where the significant shift being part of Salesforce was that it opened the door to large enterprises, but it's also the scale was different. The scale was not about features. The scale about, can your platform scale? Can your platform be up all the time? Is it reliable? And MuleSoft is in the integration business. It means that a lot of softwares that run on MuleSoft's platform are business critical. They really, really need to be up and running all the time, like absolutely all the time. So it became extremely critical, and the scale became less about, can you hire more people to build more features and deliver more features, but it became more about, can you build a very, very robust platform that just cannot fail? And that's where the scale aspects change significantly.
So you just use the expression "cannot fail," but like everything eventually fails, right? So how did you orient the team? Like, what is the sort of philosophy or value structure that you look to build in a team where, as a whole, the expectation from your customers is this thing needs to be super reliable, resilient, robust, whatever words you want to use. But we need to move quickly on doing that. We're probably going to make some mistakes along the way. Like, how do you build a culture that's trusting, but also has this kind of North Star around, robustness and reliability? How did you make that balance?
I think the first thing we need to understand, the first thing was I really grilled on the business side that, are you sure that you want that kind of availability? Because that availability will come with a cost. It's not free. It's just, yes, you want another 9 at the last of your 2 nines or 3 nines. It comes with a significant cost, very, very high cost in terms of the architecture and the cost of in terms of your cost, right? Cost of your infrastructure. So once we got that settled, I think it was exposing our engineers to our customers of, look at what the customer is trying to do on our platform. Like there are banks out there who have their ATM transactions running on our platform. Like, imagine the amount of dollars that you will lose if that goes down for like 30 minutes. Imagine how much money the bank will lose. Or, for example, there were airlines which were running their ticketing system on us. Imagine that you're in the line, your flight is about to take off, and your systems are down. What's the impact going to have on the bottom line of that business? Once you expose those things to the engineers, they start to grasp what is more important. And then we set our goals of what's the availability metrics that we were shooting for. We figured out our architecture and design from that pattern. And then we drilled it into, from a quality metrics perspective, and also from how we ship software perspective, having those metrics, very high operational rigor around reviews every week, looking at the metrics. So we built a lot of culture around observability, around those metrics, and very high awareness of where it's headed, and reducing our MTTR, mean time to resolve. Even if there's an issue, how quickly can you resolve it? Building safeguards so that even if there is an issue, how do you respond and quickly resolve it and does not let it drag on? So those are the practices we started building. It takes time. It takes time to build those things, and it took us time. But that's where you have to be very clear on what's the business objective, because that did come at the cost of building features. It means that we slowed down on building features, and we built a lot of things around platform reliability and uptime.
And was that this is probably a leading question, but important to convey to the engineers working on it, this is the goal, and the business, whatever, the stakeholders, I hate all these words, but I just live with them. The stakeholders are bought in, right? Like, we have agreement, not just within engineering, but from product and from go-to-market and everybody, that this is actually the value we're building. This is where we're going to invest. And when you say, oh my gosh, that's going to take this huge re-architecture to actually get that extra 9, we're all signed up for that, right? This is like, we're making that investment versus go build all this stuff, and by the way, make it 5 nines available, like as kind of a side. Like, how critical was that to really land with the engineers? So
it was very critical that engineers understand not just the customers, but understand that the business is completely bought into it. So one of the things which Salesforce did very well when we got acquired was that everything at Salesforce was prioritized in order. So anytime you see a list, it's always assumed that's priority order. So once that got drilled in, I think the first priority for us was always trust and reliability. And that's what we have at ClickUp also. Our ClickUp's number one priority is always trust and reliability. Because my belief is that as a software company, everyone sells trust first. If you don't trust the software, you're not going to buy it, irrespective of how cool it is. So that's where it got drilled into the engineers, but also I help them understand that it is the business needs this. The business is completely bought into it. The entire company is behind it. Once we got that alignment, so showing them, getting them the customer empathy and showing them the alignment across all functions of the business, they both are equally important. If you don't have that, you will have a lot of noise in the system because people have different, understanding of the priorities, different asks, and it will distract more than help.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's huge. And so, as now you're at ClickUp, sort of taking that lesson forward, right? Trust and reliability, number one, bringing what you have from that experience at MuleSoft inside of Salesforce, whatever. As you start to, as you've built up the team and conveyed in them or have tried to convey to them this value, is there anything that you've taken from that or anything that you've tried to do a little bit differently to see if it gets you there in terms of how this team is thinking? I mean, you mentioned it's a unique context, different people. So what's working in terms of getting folks really rallied around that at ClickUp?
I think at ClickUp, so MuleSoft was a little later in the journey. If you think it was already a public company, the revenue was fairly large. It was already over $500 million in revenue. So it was slightly different context where ClickUp is still a small company. We still have to continue to build features while putting our trust and reliability as number one priority. So it's slightly different. That's why I said that, every time you bring different context, you have to step back and figure out from the macroeconomic conditions, your competitive landscape, your just journey of the company itself and what phase of the company it is. So we brought in trust and reliability is still our number one priority. But again, we're also balancing it with innovations that we need to continue to do in our product. Whereas in my previous one, it was trust and reliability took up almost the entire engineering group, where here we are balancing that with a lot of innovation that we're building in. So that's where it becomes, you have to understand the phase of the company, your competitive landscape, where you are, and make your decisions accordingly. But again, I still believe that trust and reliability is always number one for any software business. And then you got to balance it with, you have to understand your business, your people around you, and you have to balance accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. And is it, I guess the other thing that I've noticed, my experience in companies sort of at this earlier stage, is a lot of times the sort of engineering skill sets that you're even looking for tend to be more around, innovation and trying ideas and whatever. Whereas maybe at a Salesforce or MuleSoft, you have a pool of folks who are used to at least operating at really large scale and thinking about, resilience and stuff like that. So have you sort of hired to bring in folks with different perspectives there? Is it something that you're sort of training and teaching people about as you strive towards reliability and trust? Like, what's your sort of approach to getting that in the team, that mindset?
So I think we have hired. So it is, I think we've leaned on, I would have wished to train, but in this case, we hired a lot of people who come from large companies or who build large systems and scale large systems before. So we've done that. However, they're also coming and teaching people who built ClickUp, who got ClickUp to this stage and who got the 0 to 1 journey, and bringing some of the bad practices about, how do you scale systems? How do you scale your software delivery process? How do you scale your infrastructure? How do you scale your data platforms? So they are bringing that experience from companies like Amazon and Facebook and Lyft and Uber of the world, and bringing that experience to ClickUp and helping others also who were at ClickUp and got that 0 to 1 journey. I think the engineers, there are different types of engineers who have 0 to 1 journey, and then there is 1 to 100 journey. They both are extremely important, and they both are extremely hard and unique by itself. For ClickUp at this phase, we need both of them. And that's where because we're continuing to innovate, we're continuing to build new products while still scaling to the millions of users right now.
Yeah. And do you separate those things at all? Like, I don't know how to frame this exactly, but you probably have some parts of your product that you believe are sort of dialed, and you're trying to scale, and maybe other areas where you're like, maybe we'll extend in this area, but we need to innovate and try things. And what I mean by separate is sort of really clearly articulate, therefore, this needs to be super robust. Don't build anything here that is kind of just an experiment. But over here, if you make it too robust, we're wasting time because we don't know if it's actually the right product yet. Like, can you juggle that inside of what organization? How do you go about that?
So we do that, and that's where organizational structure comes in. So we have a platform organization. So there are three portions of it, how we have solved it at ClickUp. One is we created a platform organization, which is providing a lot of common services and common infrastructure for everyone to scale, so that everyone does not have to think of all the patterns of scaling. So that we've extracted some of that out and hired a lot of 1 to 100 people to help us scale the infrastructure, the data platforms, things like that. Then there are teams where the mix of 0 to 1 and 100 is different based on the phase of the product. So for example, there are a few products right now that we are experimenting. We don't know if what's the right experience look like. We don't know if this product will speak to what types of use case. And there are more 0 to 1 engineers there versus the scale. There's just one scale person, and most of them are 0 to 1 engineers, where we already have a product market fit. We know this product the users love this product and experience. And now it's about how do we scale it, both in terms of the experience and the platform. So the mix is different, you're right. And we're very thoughtful about it in how we separate the concerns. The one thing is that as we scale, one thing that we have indexed on is if we can abstract out a lot of scaling to a platform pieces so that the same pattern can be applied across the board versus everyone thinking about the same problem, that how do I scale my service? Yeah. It's easier because you can hire fewer people can give that leverage to everyone. That's something that we definitely relied on.
Yeah, I think the time that you're in, as we talked about, the 40 to 150 is critical for getting that stuff into place, right? Like, hey, we're starting to break things up into different components. We have teams, as you talked about. This is a great opportunity for leverage. Otherwise, we're trying to pull back together, all these different pathways that we went down. Which we do see a lot.
So that's something that I talked about. I think a few weeks back, I was talking with someone, and I talked about crawl, walk, and run. That before you go from 50 to 150 or 200, people should build the systems in place so that you can scale. Scaling is not just about you go and hire 50, 100 engineers and you automatically scale. You have to build your systems and organizations in place so that as you onboard new people, they can get onboarded. They can confidently write code. They can write code with a pattern that is there. Otherwise, they'll create more noise in the system than you can.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's not just that you're capped at linear, right? Like you can get leverage and exponential sort of capacity out of scaling if you build those, high leverage SharePoints or whatever. But you actually get the opposite, right? Like you get to this place where the more people you add, the less you can get done because you don't have coordination. People are reinventing the same thing. They're asking all the same questions. Everyone's trying to answer their questions instead of doing the work, sort of thing. Like really, I totally agree that investment as you start to scale, but balancing it, because otherwise you'll stop everything to just build tooling or whatever. But it's a critical point. So, you're in the space of productivity, right? This is clearly something that you think about a lot at ClickUp. So is there anything, as you think about it as, I guess, a user of your own product or someone who spends, not just their engineering time thinking about productivity, but, as an offering, is there anything that's sort of a interesting or unique direct influence from how you think about the product and productivity overall that's reflected back into the way that you think about having your teams deliver or build internally?
I think one of the things that we have realized, and this is again coming from talking to customers on how they've used ClickUp, is aligning everyone towards a common mission is extremely important. Extremely important. Because I've seen when people start implementing ClickUp, they are trying the teams to be aligned to the broader goals. And every time they have that misalignment, every time I talk to customers, they're like, okay, yeah, the productivity is going down because they're not aligned to the goals of the broader company. And that's what made me realize how important it is. Like, intellectually speaking, we all understand that, yes, it is important for every team to have their mission aligned with the business goals. But you really understand that when I go to talk to customers and how they're using ClickUp, this becomes so much apparent to me that now like it's just gotten very, very high on my priority list. Let's make sure that every team's mission is aligned to business goals. And the teams understand that. They have visibility into it. Not just it's aligned, but the teams understand and have the visibility, because if they don't have that, they won't have the motivation. They won't know what business metrics they're moving. And that's where that one has been very sombering after talking to customers and how important that is. And that's something that we have implemented a lot more inside ClickUp engineering organization on how making sure that they understand the business goals and how their team's mission is aligned to those business goals. And they have that visibility all the time.
It's such a great reflection. And I probably should have been obvious to me, because we think about CI/CD, we do this for lots of customers. And so we see when they succeed and fail, and we use that knowledge to think, like, one, to share with the global community, hey, this works for folks, this doesn't. But two, as we think about our own stuff, we're like, well, that's really interesting. I wonder if we should do more of that. And so the notion that, you're sitting in the middle of all of these customers trying to optimize productivity and think effectively about productivity and seeing who's succeeding and who's struggling gives you that great insight about, oh, wait, I could take this and actually go do this with my team. And this is what really, like, you really have the data to back, what you said is sort of like academically you can reason about it. But awesome. Well, what a great takeaway. Listen to your customers, people, for so many reasons. There's really no reason not to. So we're heading into the closing here. So to wrap things up, can you, I want to move into this red build rewind. Can you tell me a little bit about an experience that you've had that was maybe felt catastrophic in the moment? I'll say things didn't go to plan, but ultimately taught you something really valuable that you've been able to, to carry on from there and reuse, I guess, later in your career.
Well, I'll talk about something, but I'll be slightly vague because it's not as public. There was a security incident, at one of my previous companies, and that security incident was definitely catastrophic at that moment. Mm-hmm. We were working. I think we worked like 4 days straight 4 days in the office, all 24 hours, and it was a very it taught me the importance of security just in general, how customers get impacted by it, but also it taught me a lot about how to build the responses after that, and how do you handle your customers and the visibility you provide if something happens. And that's something that I've taken away from that significantly, both from an operational aspect of how do you operate it once you get into this situations, which at that point looks really, really bad. And how do you recover from it? How do you make sure that you have the visibility, provide the visibility, be transparent with your customers? That's something that I've held since then. One, understanding the importance of what we build on our customers, and when things go wrong, how do you provide that transparency to the customers? Many times they appreciate it so much. Like I was at that point, I was imagining that they would not appreciate that much transparency, and they would say that, wow, you have so many flaws in your system, really? But the transparency was so critical to building that trust that after that incident, our trust with our customers just grew, did not go down, but actually went up. That was very, very big learning moment for me.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I could totally empathize, sympathize. I've sadly been in similar situations. But I think that taking that away, like what's kind of interesting about security, and you highlighted it a bit, is you definitely can't hide from it. Like often we have legal obligations to disclose things to customers and whatever. And, whereas I have kids and I often think about their desire to like not own up to things that have happened, and so it's kind of human nature to try to mask things. But when you're forced to, right, you're in that situation, you have to deal with it. You have that conversation. You're like, wait a second, this is fine. Like, actually, yes, I wish this hadn't happened. But the more open we are, the more we, build partnerships with our customers, help them understand what the real impact is to them. They just want information right now so they can work, they can solve their part of the problem, whatever. You go through that experience and you're like, wait, that's actually a really great way to handle problems, right? Is to be really open and transparent and just face it up front and take it on. Like all of the the hiding that we tried to, I'll just say, when we were younger, doesn't help, right? Like someone always finds out, and again, I'm just joking about kids, but like it's real. Like you can't make these problems go away, and the best way to address them is to just take them head on, work together. Ultimately, I mean, I don't know the situation of your customers. I would assume many of them were like, great, how do we help, right? Like, how do we get this to a good spot? Because it affects us, it affects you. You've done so many great things for us in the past. And, as you said, you end up with more trust, because that's how it gets built, right? Is that transparency and just...
It looks different in that moment, though. In that moment, you feel pressured, and I like the relation. I like how you related with the kids. In that moment, it does feel that, hey, let's hold back all the information.
Yeah, exactly. Like somehow this is going to blow over. Do not follow that instinct. Children or adults alike, do not follow that instinct. Just get it out on the table and address it. It's going to be fine. It's always the better way. And so, so much of, even the big failures, which are not like a hypothesis, this is something that truly went wrong. Like in those big moments, the best thing you can do is jump on it. And the thing that's really going to matter is how you respond, right? Yeah. That's the thing that everyone's going to take away. Love it. Love it. Great lesson. Good thing to carry with you, again, in the big and the small. Thanks so much for joining me here today. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. If you enjoyed the podcast, subscribe on your podcast provider of choice. If there's someone you want us to talk to or something you want us to talk about, find us on Twitter at CircleCI. Let us know. Shailesh, again, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.